Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was an American artist, director, and producer who was a leading figure in the visual art movement known as pop art. His works explore the relationship between artistic expression, celebrity culture, and advertising that flourished by the 1960s, and span a variety of media, including painting, silk screening, photography, film, and sculpture. Some of his best-known works include the silk screen paintings Campbell's Soup Cans and Marilyn Diptych, the experimental film Chelsea Girls, and the multimedia events known as the Exploding Plastic Inevitable. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, Warhol initially pursued a successful career as a commercial illustrator. After exhibiting his work in several galleries in the late 1950s, he began to receive recognition as an influential and controversial artist. His New York studio, The Factory, became a well-known gathering place that brought together distinguished intellectuals, drag queens, playwrights, bohemian street people, Hollywood celebrities, and wealthy patrons. He promoted a collection of personalities known as Warhol superstars, and is credited with coining the widely used expression, 15 minutes of fame. In the late 1960s, he managed and produced the experimental rock band The Velvet Underground and founded Interview magazine. He authored numerous books, including The Philosophy of Andy Warhol and Popism, The Warhol 60s. He is also notable as a gay man who lived openly as such before the gay liberation movement. After a gallbladder surgery in 1987, Warhol died in February of that year at the age of 58. Warhol has been the subject of numerous retrospective exhibitions, books, and feature and documentary films. The Andy Warhol Museum in his native city of Pittsburgh, which holds an extensive permanent collection of art and archives, is the largest museum in the United States dedicated to a single artist. Many of his creations are very collectible and highly valuable. The highest price ever paid for a Warhol painting is $105 million for a 1963 canvas titled Silver Car Crash. His works include some of the most expensive paintings ever sold. A 2009 article in The Economist described Warhol as the bellwether of the art market. Early life and beginnings 1928 to 49. South Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Warhol was born on August 6, 1928. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was the fourth child of André Warhol and Julia, whose first child was born in the homeland and died before their move to the U.S. His parents were working-class Lemko immigrants from Miko, located in today's northeastern Slovakia, part of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. Warhol's father emigrated to the United States in 1914, and his mother joined him in 1921. After the death of Warhol's grandparents, Warhol's father worked in a coal mine. The family lived at 55 Beeland Street and later at 3252 Dawson Street in the Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh. The family was Byzantine Catholic and attended St. John Chrysostom Byzantine Catholic Church. Andy Warhol had two older brothers. Pavel, the oldest, was born before the family emigrated. Jan was born in Pittsburgh. Pavel's son, James Warhol, became a successful children's book illustrator. In third grade, Warhol had Sydenham's career, the nervous system disease that causes involuntary movements of the extremities, which is believed to be a complication of scarlet fever which causes skin pigmentation blotchiness. He became a hypochondriac, developing a fear of hospitals and doctors. Often bedridden as a child, he became an outcast at school and bonded with his mother. At times when he was confined to bed, He drew, listened to the radio, and collected pictures of movie stars around his bed. Warhol later described this period as very important in the development of his personality, skill set and preferences. When Warhol was 13, his father died in an accident. As a teenager, Warhol graduated from Shenley High School in 1945. Also as a teen, Warhol won a Scholastic Art and Writing Award. After graduating from high school, his intentions were to study art education at the University of Pittsburgh in the hope of becoming an art teacher, but his plans changed, and he enrolled in the Carnegie Institute of Technology in Pittsburgh, where he studied commercial art. During his time there, Warhol joined the campus Modern Dance Club and Beaux-Arts Society. He also served as art director of the student art magazine, Carnot, illustrating a cover in 1948 and a full-page interior illustration in 1949. These are believed to be his first two published artworks. Warhol earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Pictorial Design in 1949. Later that year, he moved to New York City and began a career in magazine illustration and advertising. 1950s. Warhol's early career was dedicated to commercial and advertising art, where his first commission had been to draw shoes for Glamour magazine in the late 1940s. In the 1950s, Warhol worked as a designer for shoe manufacturer Israel Miller. American photographer John Coplands recalled that nobody drew shoes the way Andy did. He somehow gave each shoe a temperament of its own, a sort of sly, Toulouse-Lautrec kind of sophistication, but the shape and the style came through accurately, and the buckle was always in the right place. The kids in the apartment, which Andy shared in New York, note by Coplands, noticed that the vamps on Andy's shoe drawings kept getting longer and longer. But Israel Miller didn't mind. Miller loved them. Warhol's whimsical ink drawings of shoe advertisements figured in some of his earliest showings at the Bodley Gallery in New York. Warhol was an early adopter of the silkscreen printmaking process as a technique for making paintings. While working in the shoe industry, Warhol developed his blotted line technique, applying ink to paper and then blotting the ink while still wet, which was akin to a printmaking process on the most rudimentary scale. His use of tracing paper and ink allowed him to repeat the basic image and also to create endless variations on the theme, a method that prefigures his 1960s silkscreen canvas. In his book Popism, The Warhol 60s, Warhol writes, "When you do something exactly wrong, you always turn up something." With the rapid expansion of the record industry, RCA Records hired Warhol, along with another freelance artist, Sid Maurer, to design album covers and promotional materials. 1960s. Tennessee Williams talking on the SS France, 1967. In the background, Paul Morrissey. He began exhibiting his work during the 1950s. He held exhibitions at the Hugo Gallery and the Bodley Gallery in New York City, in California. His first West Coast Gallery exhibition was on July 9, 1962, in the Ferris Gallery of Los Angeles. The exhibition marked his West Coast debut of pop art. Andy Warhol's first New York solo pop art exhibition was hosted at Eleanor Ward's Stable Gallery November 6–24, 1962. The exhibit included the works Maryland Diptych, 100 soup cans, 100 Coke bottles, and $100 bills. At the Stable Gallery exhibit, the artist met for the first time poet John Giorno, who would star in Warhol's first film, Sleep, in 1963. It was during the 1960s that Warhol began to make paintings of iconic American objects such as dollar bills, mushroom clouds, electric chairs, Campbell's soup cans, Coca-Cola bottles, celebrities such as Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Marlon Brando, Troy Donahue, Muhammad Ali, and Elizabeth Taylor, as well as newspaper headlines of photographs of police dogs attacking African American protesters during the Birmingham campaign in the civil rights movement. During these years, he founded his studio, The Factory, and gathered about him a wide range of artists, writers, musicians, and underground celebrities. His work became popular and controversial. Warhol had this to say about Coca-Cola. New York City's Museum of Modern Art hosted a symposium on pop art in December 1962, during which artists such as Warhol were attacked for capitulating to consumerism. Critics were scandalized by Warhol's open embrace of market culture. This symposium set the tone for Warhol's reception. A pivotal event was the 1964 exhibit The American Supermarket, a show held in Paul Bianchini's Upper East Side Gallery. The show was presented as a typical U.S. small supermarket environment, except that everything in it, from the produce, canned goods, meat, posters on the wall, etc., was created by 6 prominent pop artists of the time. Among them the controversial Billy Apple, Mary Inman, and Robert Watts. Warhol's painting of a can of Campbell's soup cost $1,500, while each autographed can sold for $6. The exhibit was one of the first mass events that directly confronted the general public with both pop art and the perennial question of what art is. As an advertisement illustrator in the 1950s, Warhol used assistants to increase his productivity. Collaboration would remain a defining aspect of his working methods throughout his career. This was particularly true in the 1960s. One of the most important collaborators during this period was Gerard Malanga. Malanga assisted the artist with the production of silk screens, films, sculpture, and other works at The Factory, Warhol's aluminum foil and silver paint-lined studio on 47th Street. Other members of Warhol's Factory crowd included Freddie Herco, Ondine, Ronald Tarval, Mary Woronov, Billy Name, and Bridget Berlin. During the 1960s, Warhol also groomed a retinue of bohemian and counterculture eccentrics upon whom he bestowed the designation superstars, including Nico, Joe D'Alessandro, Edie Sedgwick, Viva, Ultraviolet, Hollywood Lawn, Jackie Curtis, and Candy Darling. These people all participated in the Factory films, and some, like Berlin, remained friends with Warhol until his death. Important figures in the New York underground art, cinema world, such as writer John Giorno and filmmaker Jack Smith, also appear in Warhol films of the 1960s, revealing Warhol's connections to a diverse range of artistic scenes during this time. Less well-known was his support and collaboration with several teenagers during this era, who would achieve prominence later in life, including writer David Dalton, photographer Stephen Shaw, and artist Bibba Hansen. Attempted murder, 1968. On June 3, 1968, radical feminist writer Valerie Solanas shot Warhol and Mario Amaya, art critic and curator, at Warhol's studio. Before the shooting, Solanas had been a marginal figure in the Factory scene. She authored in 1967 the SCUM Manifesto, a separatist feminist tract that advocated the elimination of men, and appeared in the 1968 Warhol film A Man. Earlier on the day of the attack, Solanas had been turned away from the Factory after asking for the return of a script she had given to Warhol. The script had apparently been misplaced. Meyer received only minor injuries and was released from the hospital later the same day. Warhol was seriously wounded by the attack and barely survived. Surgeons opened his chest and massaged his heart to help stimulate its movement again. He suffered physical effects for the rest of his life, including being required to wear a surgical corset. The shooting had a profound effect on Warhol's life and art. Solanas was arrested the day after the assault, after turning herself into police. By way of explanation, she said that Warhol had too much control over my life. She was subsequently diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and eventually sentenced to 3 years under the control of the Department of Corrections. After the shooting, the factory scene heavily increased security, and for many, the factory 60s ended. Warhol had this to say about the attack: "Before I was shot, I always thought that I was more half there than all there. I always suspected that I was watching TV instead of living life. People sometimes say that the way things happen in movies is unreal. But actually it's the way things happen in life that's unreal. The movies make emotions look so strong and real, whereas when things really do happen to you, it's like watching television. You don't feel anything. Right when I was being shot and ever since, I knew that I was watching television. The channels switch, but it's all television." 1970s. Jimmy Carter and Andy Warhol in 1977, compared to the success and scandal of Warhol's work in the 1960s, the 1970s were a much quieter decade, as he became more entrepreneurial. According to Bob Colascello, Warhol devoted much of his time to rounding up new, rich patrons for portrait commissions, including Shah of Iran Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, his wife Empress Farah Pahlavi, his sister Princess Ashraf Pahlavi, Mick Jagger, Liza Minnelli, John Lennon, Diana Ross, and Brigitte Bardot. Warhol's famous portrait of Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong was created in 1973. He also founded, with Gerard Malanga, Interview magazine, and published The Philosophy of Andy Warhol, an idea expressed in the book Making Money is Art, and Working is Art, and Good Business is the Best Art. Warhol socialized at various night spots in New York City, including Max's Kansas City, and, later in the 1970s, Studio 54. He was generally regarded as quiet, shy, and a meticulous observer. Art critic Robert Hughes called him the white mole of Union Square. With his longtime friend, Stuart Piver, Warhol founded the New York Academy of Art in 1979. 1980s. Warhol had a re-emergence of critical and financial success in the 1980s, partially due to his affiliation and friendships with a number of prolific younger artists who were dominating the bull market of 1980s New York art: Jean-Michel Basquiat, Julian Schnabel, David Salle, and other so-called neo-expressionists, as well as members of the trance avant-garde movement in Europe, including Francesco Clemente and Enzo Cucci. By this time, graffiti artist Fab Five Freddy paid homage to Warhol when he painted an entire train with Campbell soup cans. This was instrumental in Freddy becoming involved in the underground NYC art scene and becoming an affiliate of Basquiat. By this period, Warhol was being criticized for becoming merely a business artist. In 1979, reviewers disliked his exhibits of portraits of 1970s personalities and celebrities, calling them superficial, facile and commercial, with no depth or indication of the significance of the subjects. They also criticized his 1980 exhibit of 10 portraits at the Jewish Museum in Manhattan. entitled Jewish Geniuses, which Warhol, who was uninterested in Judaism and Jews, had described in his diary as, "they're going to sell." In hindsight, however, some critics have come to view Warhol's superficiality and commerciality as the most brilliant mirror of our times, contending that Warhol had captured something irresistible about the zeitgeist of American culture in the 1970s. Warhol also had an appreciation for intense Hollywood glamour. He once said, "I love Los Angeles. I love Hollywood. They're so beautiful. Everything's plastic, but I love plastic. I want to be plastic." Death. St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Cemetery, Bratislava, Slovakia. Left Warhol died in Manhattan at 6:32 a.m. on February 22, 1987. According to news reports, he had been making a good recovery from gallbladder surgery at New York Hospital before dying in his sleep from a sudden post-operative cardiac arrhythmia. Prior to his diagnosis and operation, Warhol delayed having his recurring gallbladder problems checked, as he was afraid to enter hospitals and see doctors. His family sued the hospital for inadequate care, saying that the arrhythmia was caused by improper care and water intoxication. The malpractice case was quickly settled out of court. Warhol's family received an undisclosed sum of money shortly before Warhol's death. Doctors expected Warhol to survive the surgery, though a revaluation of the case about 30 years after his death showed many indications that Warhol's surgery was in fact riskier than originally thought. It was widely reported at the time that Warhol died of a routine surgery, though when considering factors such as his age, a family history of gallbladder problems, his previous gunshot wounds, and his medical state in the weeks leading up to the procedure, the potential risk of death following the surgery appeared to have been significant. Warhol's brothers took his body back to Pittsburgh, where an open coffin wake was held at the Thomas P. Kunsak Funeral Home. The solid bronze casket had gold-plated rails and white upholstery. Warhol was dressed in a black cashmere suit, a paisley tie, a platinum wig, and sunglasses. He was laid out holding a small prayer book and a red rose. The funeral liturgy was held at the Holy Ghost Byzantine Catholic Church on Pittsburgh's north side. The eulogy was given by Monsignor Peter Tay. Yoko Ono and John Richardson were speakers. The coffin was covered with white roses and asparagus ferns. After the liturgy, the coffin was driven to St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Cemetery in Bethel Park, a south suburb of Pittsburgh. At the grave, the priest said a brief prayer and sprinkled holy water on the casket. Before the coffin was lowered, Paige Powell dropped a copy of Interview magazine, an interview t-shirt, and a bottle of the Estée Lauder perfume, Beautiful, into the grave. Warhol was buried next to his mother and father. A memorial service was held in Manhattan for Warhol on April 1, 1987, at St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York. Foundation. Warhol's will dictated that his entire estate, with the exception of a few modest legacies to family members, would go to create a foundation dedicated to the advancement of the visual arts. Warhol had so many possessions that it took Sotheby's 9 days to auction his estate after his death. The auction grossed more than $20 million. In 1987, in accordance with Warhol's will, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts began. The foundation serves as the estate of Andy Warhol, but also has a mission to foster innovative artistic expression and the creative process, and is focused primarily on supporting work of a challenging and often experimental nature. The Artists' Rights Society is the U.S. copyright representative for the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts for all Warhol works, with the exception of Warhol film stills. The U.S. copyright representative for Warhol film stills is the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. Additionally, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts has agreements in place for its image archive. All digital images of Warhol are exclusively managed by Corbus, while all transparency images of Warhol are managed by Art Resource. The Andy Warhol Foundation released its 20th anniversary annual report as a 3-volume set in 2007, Volume I, 1987 to 2007, Volume 2, Grants and Exhibitions, and Volume 3, Legacy Program. The Foundation remains one of the largest grant-giving organizations for the visual arts in the U.S. Paintings. By the beginning of the 1960s, pop art was an experimental form that several artists were independently adopting. Some of these pioneers, such as Roy Lichtenstein, would later become synonymous with the movement. Warhol, who would become famous as the Pope of Pop, turned to this new style, where popular subjects could be part of the artist's palette. His early paintings show images taken from cartoons and advertisements, hand-painted with paint drips. Marilyn Monroe was a pop art painting that Warhol had done, and it was very popular. Those drips emulated the style of successful abstract expressionists. Warhol's first pop art paintings were displayed in April 1961, serving as the backdrop for New York department store Bron Whitteller's window display. This was the same stage his pop art contemporaries Jasper Johns, James Rosenquist, and Robert Rauschenberg had also once graced. It was the gallerist Muriel Latau who came up with the ideas for both the soup cans and Warhol's dollar paintings. On November 23, 1961, Warhol wrote Latau a check for $50, which, according to the 2009 Warhol biography, Pop, The Genius of Warhol, was payment for coming up with the idea of the soup cans as subject matter. For his first major exhibition, Warhol painted his famous cans of Campbell's soup, which he claimed to have had for lunch for most of his life. A 1964 large Campbell's soup can was sold in a 2007 Sotheby's auction to a South American collector for £5.1 million. He loved celebrities, so he painted them as well. From these beginnings he developed his later style and subjects. Instead of working on a signature subject matter, as he started out to do, he worked more and more on a signature style, slowly eliminating the handmade from the artistic process. Warhol frequently used silk screening. His later drawings were traced from slide projections. At the height of his fame as a painter, Warhol had several assistants who produced his silk screen multiples, following his directions to make different versions and variations. In 1979, Warhol was commissioned by BMW to paint a Group 4 race version of the then elite supercar, BMW M1, for the fourth installment in the BMW Art Car project. It was reported at the time that, unlike the three artists before him, Warhol opted to paint directly onto the automobile himself instead of letting technicians transfer his scale model design to the car. It was indicated that Warhol spent only a total of 23 minutes to paint the entire car. Warhol produced both comic and serious works. His subject could be a soup can or an electric chair. Warhol used the same techniques, silk screens, reproduced serially, and often painted with bright colors, whether he painted celebrities, everyday objects, or images of suicide, car crashes, and disasters, as in the 1962-63 Death and Disaster series. The Death and Disaster paintings included Red Car Crash, Purple Jumping Man, and Orange Disaster. One of these paintings, the diptych Silver Car Crash, became the highest-priced work of his when it sold at Sotheby's Contemporary Art Auction on Wednesday, November 13, 2013, for $105.4 million. Some of Warhol's work, as well as his own personality, has been described as being Keatonesque. Warhol has been described as playing dumb to the media. He sometimes refused to explain his work. He has suggested that all one needs to know about his work is already there on the surface. His Rorschach ink blots are intended as pop comments on art and what art could be. His cow wallpaper and his oxidation paintings are also noteworthy in this context. Equally noteworthy is the way these works, and their means of production, mirrored the atmosphere at Andy's New York factory. Biographer Bob Colaccello provides some details on Andy's piss paintings. Warhol's first portrait of Basquiat is a black photo silkscreen over an oxidized copper piss painting. After many years of silkscreen, oxidation, photography, etc., Warhol returned to painting, with a brush in hand in a series of more than 50 large collaborative works done with Jean-Michel Basquiat between 1984 and 1986. Despite negative criticism when these were first shown, Warhol called some of them masterpieces, and they were influential for his later work. Andy Warhol was commissioned in 1984 by collector and gallerist Alexander Eilers to produce work based on Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper for an exhibition at the old refectory of the Palazzo del Stelline in Milan, opposite from the Santa Maria del Grazie, where Leonardo da Vinci's mural can be seen. Warhol exceeded the demands of the commission and produced nearly 100 variations on the theme, mostly silk screens and paintings, and among them a collaborative sculpture with Basquiat, the 10 punching bags. The Milan exhibition that opened in January 1987, with a set of 22 silk screens, was the last exhibition for both the artist and the gallerist. The series of The Last Supper was seen by some as arguably his greatest, but by others as wishy-washy, religious, and spiritless. It is the largest series of religious-themed works by any U.S. artist. Artist Maurizio Catalan describes that it is difficult to separate daily encounters from the art of Andy Warhol. That's probably the greatest thing about Warhol, the way he penetrated and summarized our world, to the point that distinguishing between him and our everyday life is basically impossible, and in any case useless. Warhol was an inspiration towards Catalan's magazine and photography compilations, such as Permanent Food, Charlie, and Toilet Paper. In the period just before his death, Warhol was working on Cars, a series of paintings for Mercedes-Benz, a self-portrait by Andy Warhol, which sold in New York at the May post-war and contemporary evening sale in Christie's, fetched $38.4 million. On May 9, 2012, his classic painting Double Elvis sold at auction at Sotheby's in New York for $33 million. With commission, the sale price totaled $37,042,500, short of the $50 million that Sotheby's had predicted the painting might bring. The piece shows Elvis Presley in a gunslinger pose. It was first exhibited in 1963 at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles. Warhol made 22 versions of the Double Elvis, 9 of which are held in museums. In November 2013, his Silver Car Crash diptych sold at Sotheby's contemporary art auction for $105.4 million, a new record for the pop artist. Created in 1963, this work had rarely been seen in public in the previous years. In November 2014, Triple Elvis sold for $81.9 meters at an auction in New York. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.